Hey everybody, my name is Steven and I am the host of the Going Somewhere podcast. And before we jump into today's episode, I want to thank you for watching today. If you haven't already, please subscribe so you can stay up to date with every new episode and leave some comments. Let us know what your big takeaways are and how this podcast is impacting you. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful host, Steven. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Going Somewhere podcast. Today I'm joined by Whitney Leedahl. How are you doing, Whitney?
I'm great. So glad to be here.
Hey, I am so happy to have you on. We were just talking about how, for me, the podcast is half like, I want it to be beneficial to the listeners, but it's also just, I get to hang out with my friends.
Yeah, when do we get to hang out?
This is great.
Never.
I know, I have to schedule it on a podcast to hang out with people, but no, this is so fun. You and Nate have been significant role models in my life for a long time, but do you just want to maybe introduce yourself and your family and just what you do and stuff?
Yeah, my name is Whitney and I'm married to Nate and we have 3 kids, 10, 9, and 6 right now. And so we are in the throes of elementary school life and loving it. I love this season of life. My youngest is in kindergarten. And so I just waved everybody at the bus stop and I say, see you later. And
wow.
Yeah. So I feel like I've had a little more freedom than I've had since my first one came, but
yeah, we are, about exactly 5 years back.
Yes.
Because we have a nearly 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. So
yes.
It's like, I watch your life and I'm like, oh. So back in the day when we were on staff with Chi Alpha, we worked on staff with Chi Alpha for a number of years, but you guys were bi-vocational, working part-time, but we'd have staff meetings at your guys' house.
Yes.
So that you guys could be there and Amaya would be there. And I remember having staff meetings at your dining room table and me not being around babies very often. And so me just being like, she's hitting the table or she's smashing her food. And you're just like, yeah, so let's plan the next semester. Like, what are you guys thinking? And I'm like, does not anybody else hear this happening? So it's just funny how the full circle.
Yes, learning to live in distraction.
Yeah. No, it's true. Kids aren't distractions, but they do distracting things.
Yes. Yeah.
Constantly.
Wonderful distraction.
Exactly. But yeah, you guys are still involved with Chi Alpha at NDSU, and also you do a variety of other things. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I'm part-time with Chi Alpha and dabble in nursing, just the tiniest bit still. And Nate is still working at the hospital and he volunteer pastors. And so, yeah, we're loving it.
That's awesome.
Sometimes people ask, how do you balance it all? And we're like, well, this is our hobby, like our one and only hobby that we have. And we love it. We wouldn't do it any other way. So
you guys are really good at your hobby. You should consider going pro. But no, it's so cool. And that's been, such a cool example because a lot of the college students in our ministry, a majority of them are going into situations similar to your guys's where you're working full time, and you're raising kids, but also I want to be involved in ministry. So I felt sometimes as a full-time campus pastor, like I related with students and they resonated with my life, but I think there was a whole nother level, like anytime you and Nate were involved, because it's like, I see myself being there. And so I think just your guys' role has been so valuable. And it was when I was a student, because I think I moved to Fargo the summer you guys got married. So I just missed the wedding of the century. And so I have vivid memories of my time with you guys as a freshman and sophomore staying over at your house. And I remember one time specifically, Nate had gotten up, went to work. I was a college student. I slept in and then you just made me breakfast and I skipped my class that morning and we just had a talk and it was the best. So I love that.
Good memories. Yeah.
I feel like one thing that you guys are really good at and what I want to talk about today is just your ability to initiate. And I think when you talk about college students transitioning out of college, which this is kind of the time of year where you guys just had your Chi Alpha launch event where all the seniors that are leaving have an event. But I just think that that's such an important aspect of young adulthood is, especially when you leave college, there's a lot of our life in high school that's kind of here's your class schedule, here's your weekly schedule your parents have, and then you go to college and it's similar in a lot of ways. And then all of a sudden it's wait, who's doing that for me? What am I supposed to do? Do you just want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. Nate and I were just talking about this recently, and we were kind of talking about in college life. The other day I was walking through the union and there was organizational tables, and every table is like, hey, come be a part with us. Hey, come be a part with us. Hey, like you don't have to really do too much to get involved places, because every place you go, like people are begging you, like be a part of our group. Come and be a part here. Like, this is what we stand for. And so it's really easy to find places to belong in college. And then when you graduate, everything stops. I mean, you can go to work. Maybe you work in a cubicle all day long, and then you go home, maybe to your apartment by yourself, or maybe you have a roommate that has a different schedule, and all of a sudden you're all by yourself. And there's nobody really initiating like there has been in high school and college. And so I think it is so incredibly valuable, important that whether we like it or not, we got to figure out how to initiate some things in our life. Otherwise, we're going to be lonely, and we find ourselves like not feeling like we have a lot of purpose.
For sure. And, I think one of the things is there are people that are initiators, like maybe more naturally.
Yeah.
And I think we have names of people that can come to mind quickly of like, they're the ones that are gathering the people. They're the ones that are hosting the event or whatever. Mm-hmm. But then there's other people that have never viewed themselves like, I'm not an initiator. Mm-hmm. I'm not the person that's in the front of the room. I'm not the person that is a connector relationally. So how did those people kind of step into an initiating role in their own lives?
Yeah. It's not easy. And actually, I feel like now I am initiator, but that did not come naturally for me. That I feel like it was something that I really had to cultivate and discipline myself to do. I remember back in college, there was actually an outreach ministry that we were going to be a part of. And they said, well, hey, during this outreach piece, like we have this bag. And if people come to the front, like go give them this bag and introduce yourself and get to know them a little bit. And I was like, okay. And so the time was there and I had this little bag and I walked up to the person and I just got scared. I handed him the bag and I ran and I left the building. Like that's how much not of an initiator I was. But I think the biggest thing to overcome that is just seeing that I have something to offer. Like you might not be the life of the party. I'm still not. But even though like there is something that I have to offer that can be helpful and to be a blessing and to be good for others. And that is really what motivates me to be an initiator, even though it doesn't come naturally.
That's something so important for people to hear is like, I do have something to offer, and I think sometimes, the loudest people can almost crowd out and that's been a thing for me. Like being an initiator does not come hard for me. It comes very easy for me. And I've had to learn and realize like, and even in my own marriage, like Taylor is fine to kind of, come alongside, and she's not the loudest person in the room. She's the funniest person in the room. She is the funniest person in the room. But she's not always like, she doesn't demand attention. She just gains it by being naturally herself and being awesome. But I think I've had to learn to like, all right, I want to let other people step in because I know they have value that I can never add into a room, and that's my marriage. But I think it's in other people too. It's almost like looking internally of like, what do I have to offer? Yeah. And sometimes it is low self-esteem, and you have to like allow God to reshape that of like, this is who you are and who I've made you to be. But I think that's such a good place to start is like, what do I have to offer and how can I initiate in that area? But what are some of the areas that you feel like young adults have to initiate in the most often? Or what are some of the things that you guys have done?
That's a good question. I think it starts really simply. It was interesting. I was reading a news article just a bit ago, and it was talking about how loneliness is like such like an epidemic. Like even like health officials and on the front lines are seeing that like loneliness is impacting the young adult population so much right now. And I think if anything, just recognizing like, I might not be the life of the party, but I can have something to offer by just being a part of somebody not being lonely. Like just being a friend, being another person in the room, sharing simple life can be such a huge thing. I think in the workplace too, stepping in from maybe a school life to workplace life, initiating, hey, should we grab lunch together? Right. Simple things like that. And being okay with being told no, or like, hey, I can't today, or I'm not interested, and just kind of expecting that I'm going to be told no sometimes, but that's okay.
What do you think holds people back from initiating, like you just mentioned, the workplace? What are some of the things that maybe hold people back from doing that in the first place?
I think sometimes from the outside, it looks like everybody else, like, oh, well, they already have all their friends, or they already have their routines, or I think being told no. I don't know. For me, that was something that I was scared of, that, oh, what if they say no? But then I'm like, well, what if they do? What's the worst that can happen? Like,
Right.
It's just no. Then I'll just go ask somebody else. So I think those are a couple of the things that really hold us back. And I think sometimes just the unknown as well. Like, oh, I'm a young adult. Everybody else here has families, or they're older than I am. But wow, some of my most favorite friendships are with people who are in different stages of life than I am. I actually have very few friends that are in my same stage of life, it seems.
Right. Well, I think too, just comfort, I think sometimes we look at comfort as like a peak existence. Like if I'm comfortable, like we think financially, or our house, like if my house is the way I want it, and I have all the right decorations and all the right things, then that'll be good. But it leaves us longing for more, yearning for more, or what we have in aesthetic, we don't have in relational connection. And I just recently, Amy Olson came on the podcast, and she was talking about hospitality, like simple hospitality. And she's like, we will choose to not buy new things. And so if it's a rug that we're going to be concerned that somebody steps on it with 30 feet, we're not going to buy it, because we don't want to worry about that when we're trying to connect with the people. And I think just
that's really good.
The comforts of just our everyday life sometimes can cause us to, if by initiating, I'm leaving that. And what if something bad happens? And we have a mutual friend, Steve Pavic, who is kind of ingrained it in my brain of like reversing that question of like, what if they say yes? Like you might have a best friend, you might have husband or wife in the terms of like initiating even just relationships in that way. And so I think there's so much good that is behind that door that sometimes it's if I open the door and a bear is there, but the percentage of that happening is pretty low.
Right. Right. For
it's
sure.
usually something good. So
yes.
That's really good. I feel like, finance is another area that I drifted in. Like I had good teaching, and maybe it was just like my season of life. I graduated, I was single, I wasn't paying much in rent, I wasn't making much as a missionary, but at the same time, like I was just like, oh, I'm good. Like I've got what I need. I had more than I had in college. And so how can people initiate in that area of their life?
I think one thing is just being self-aware, like just taking the time to think like, how am I doing actually financially? And taking the time to think like, how do I want to handle my finances? And then being an initiator by seeking out a financial class, or seeking out, like taking the initiative to find a good book on it, or finding somebody around you who's doing it well, and sitting down, asking them like, hey, can I learn from you? But I think one thing to being an initiator is just being a little bit of self-aware and but the life we're not unpurposely self-aware. I think life just goes so fast sometimes that we don't even take the time to stop and think like, where am I actually right now? How am I doing?
Right.
And where do I want to be? But when we take the time to do that, then we can actually do something about it, which is exciting.
That's good. I like maps for some reason.
Yes.
I come back to map analogies a lot.
Lists.
You like lists?
Yes,
okay.
I like lists.
Because I when I think of a map, when I've gone backpacking with like the Nice brothers or anybody, there's, your starting point and then there's your end point.
Yeah.
But sometimes we like live our life without both, we're just kind of wandering.
Yeah.
And usually we find out like, okay, where are we going? But the first thing you do when you get to a map, like on campus, for instance, is you go to the map and hopefully there's a big thing that says you are here.
Yes.
And then it allows you to at least go, okay, I know I need to go that way. And I think the same goes with finances and just our life is just like, man, I don't know where I'm at. And so I don't know how I'm supposed to get to where Like, I know I want to be debt free. I know I want to, invest in my retirement, and I know I want to buy a house someday, but honestly, I'm scared to even figure out where I'm at in relation to
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like for me, initiating, it took a long time, but I got to the point where all my friends were financial advisors, or, many of them. Yeah. And I don't know how many phone calls or texts I got. I'm like, oh, I haven't heard from this guy in so long. I'm so excited to catch up, And then, they had their thing, and I'm glad they did, and they're doing their thing. But one of them, I took him up on lunch offer, and he was so compelling with the conversation we had, and he quickly showed me, like, this is where you're at. This is if you don't do anything different for the next 5 years. And this is what you do if you just make a little tweak for the next 5 years. Because that was always our excuse, was like, well, we can't really do much,
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, and he showed it to me. And so he's who we've trusted with our financial advising. But taking that initiative took me years to actually say, I was scared, I think.
Yeah.
And so whether it's initiating a budget, initiating a conversation, the Dave Ramsey, class,
Yes.
Financial Peace University, what are some other things in that area that people can do to initiate? I stole a lot of the good ones. So
yeah, our situation was that when we were getting married, we literally got 3 copies of Dave Ramsey's Money Makeover. And, a lot of people say, like, oh, you should read this book. It's a good book. And we're like, oh yeah, and then we got a copy, and then another person like, oh, and then by the time we got the 3rd copy, we're like, okay, we really do have to read this book. And so for us, it kind of was shoved on us, which we are super thankful for. And so that really was what initiated, conversations between us, and the willingness to have some discipline in how because the thing in the area of finances is it's denying yourself a lot of times of what you want in the moment. And so I think that's another reason why we don't take initiative, because you're like, I know the right thing to do, but I don't really want to do it today. After this or after this. But for us, the Dave Ramsey stuff, it was very informational and very motivating too. Like when you read his book, you're like, I want to do this, which the motivation is a big key, I think.
Even just, I think an easy click to the right on this area is even like listening to their podcast,
Yes, I haven't checked that one out yet.
It's really good. It's mainly him taking like calls from people. And so sometimes it's like, oh.
See, I'm old. I used to listen to his radio show, but that's probably
it's his radio show. It is his radio show.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
As a podcast. But then they'll have like people doing their debt-free screams. And so every once in a while you listen to an episode where it's like, oh, that's me. Like, that's my problem I'm facing. Like, I want to buy a house and I'm tempted to just put 2% down because that's what my friends are doing. And then to listen to Dave, call him an idiot is kind of nice. He's not calling me it. So, but I think, just taking, whether it's a resource or a class or just something that, we don't have to go all the way with initiating. And that's the hard thing.
And it's just starting somewhere. Sometimes I think we feel like we have to have everything all figured out before we can initiate something, but it's literally just taking one step forward. And that's usually the hardest one. And after that, it's kind of, then you're rolling.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like the debt snowball.
It is.
Thanks,
like
Dave Ramsey. One area that you guys, and I think college students that are leaving college, you're in an educational place. Like that's the purpose of it. You are told what to read and how to grow and become the career that you're aiming at. And I think sometimes it's like a burnout thing. It's like, I don't want to look at a book again, but I think one thing I've admired about you guys is your just desire to keep growing and to keep getting better. And whether that's in your field or whether that's just in life in general. I know one of the things that we've always been able to connect on is just like, what books are you reading, Whitney?
Yes,
I know we've had a number of times where we've read the same one and we just kind of nerd out in front of our spouses and it's fun. But what does that look like for you guys? Just initiating just a personal growth environment.
Yeah. I think for me, the biggest area that guides me in my personal growth is, again, just being self-aware and seeing where I'm lacking. Like, if somebody asks me a question and I'm like, that's a really good question. I don't know anything about that. You know, then that like sparks my like, wow, I want to be like a go-to and I want to have answers and guidance for people. And so I want to learn more about that. Or when I see things lacking in my life, or when I don't know what to do in a situation, I love to find somebody that knows way more about it than I do, or has taken time to study an area and learn from them, looking at people and authors who have done well and learning from them. But I think so often it's like, these are the things that I see in my life I need some guidance in, or I don't know anything about this. And sometimes it's hard to admit that, like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to handle this.
That's half of my life, Whitney.
Yeah, I know. I feel like the longer I live, the more and more of those. Yes. But books are a great resource, and it's really fun to learn more.
This is like a put you on the spot question, because we didn't talk about it at all, but are there any books that you would kind of jump off your mental shelf right now that's like, these are a few that new grads would benefit greatly from?
That is a really good question. So a few recently that I have been going to, Jamie Ivey and her husband have a really great book, a new book out on marriage. I believe it's called Complement. It's blue and pink. And that has been so good. Nate and I have really enjoyed it, and we do a little bit of premarital counseling with some of the college students. And so that's been a really good resource. Another book that I've really appreciated is, a lot of times people come to me asking questions about anxiety and depression in their life. And I personally have never walked through either of those. And so I feel very incompetent in how I can help. And so there's a book that's called I Love Jesus, But I Want to Die.
Wow.
And it was written by a pastor who has walked through deep depression and suicidal ideation throughout her life. And she just gives a beautiful perspective what it really feels like and what it really looks like, and how she's navigated it, and how she's prayed for healing, and it hasn't happened yet. But her big takeaway is that even in like the darkest moments, Jesus is with her. And it's just helped me have really good perspective on how, what to say to people when they feel like they're in a really, really dark spot. Wow. And she gives a lot of practical pieces on, how to take care of yourself and how to navigate counseling and medication and all of that too. And so those are just the couple off the top of my head that have been, really helpful for me recently. That's
really good. I think maybe I'll just do an episode of books to read in like different areas, because I think for me, if somebody asks me and I have 10 minutes, I can send a list of like, these are the ones,
right? Exactly.
But I think,
I'll be thinking of
I knew it was a loaded question.
Tonight in my bed, I'll be like, oh, I should have said this book, this book, and this book.
Well, if you send it, I can just still link it in the description. But there's one that I wouldn't say like this is the best book I've read, but I'm rereading it right now just because of a new season, but it's called At Your Best. And it's Carey Nieuwhof, and he talks about how like we need to be doing what we're best at when we're at our best. And so whether that's work related, hobby related, or even just like family and relationships, we have our green and yellow and red zones. And I think if young people can actually navigate and figure that out sooner in life, like we spend a lot of time, I think, doing the things that give us no joy and give us when we are technically probably at our best. And so like the book kind of helps you figure out when that is and what to do about that. And sometimes you can't control it. Like if the boss calls a meeting, you can't be like, oh, I'm actually at my best right now. I should be doing this other thing. But just cultivating what you can. And that's another initiating thing, is just initiating your own life and schedule in that way of like, if you have choice over when you can look at emails, don't look at emails in the morning, or set 10 minutes to do it and then do it later in the day. So I like coming back to those things, but I think it starts with just being, having the mentality or the heart of like a lifelong learner. And, cause it's all about motivation. I think half of just stepping into a new season and having to take the bull by the horns and initiate things and start things and do things without anybody telling you, I think the biggest thing is the why. And so maybe for whether they're a new grad or just a young adult in general that maybe is struggling to initiate, whether it's friendships, whether it's relationships at work, change in their life, what are some of the maybe the purpose, the why that you found or that you would encourage somebody else to look to for that motivation?
Ultimately, I think when we have an eternal perspective, not just like an earthly perspective, we realize how much purpose that we have. Like when we have the hope of Jesus and the love of Jesus and the peace of Jesus that only he can offer, that is what motivates me. I think that is above and beyond the top thing that motivates me. I think though, to answer your question on the practical side, sometimes when we look at work and you're like, oh, that's a lot of hours. That's a big work week coming up and, chores and bills to pay. Like sometimes we can look forward and there's not a lot of fun that we see. I think it is really helpful to have something to look forward to. That's something that Nate and I talk a lot about is like, what are we looking forward to right now? And just that little piece, and maybe it's a month away, maybe it's 6 months away, maybe it's something big, maybe it's something small, but just continually having something fun to look forward to seems to like infiltrate into all the other areas of life that maybe we have to do out of diligence. And so just taking time and initiating something to look forward to has been really helpful to us.
That's really good. I think that's an area that maybe I nerd out in a little bit too, is just like, so I thought about this in terms of a wedding. Weddings are the most anticipated day in somebody's life, and there's celebration, there's expectations, all these things. And really it's one day, it gets as much time as another day. And of course it's very significant and, all the things that take place. But I just kind of thought like those ingredients that are in that, what if that was our everyday? You look forward to a wedding for a year, or you're planning it, you're looking forward to it, you're expecting it. And I've just kind of thought through like the farther or the closer you can get like that next thing you're looking forward to, the better. So and for me, initiating has kind of come down to this too, of like when I have lunch with my coworker on the schedule for noon on Tuesday, that's an expectation. That's one of those things that's like, I'm excited about that.
Yes.
And so I think it's almost putting those things closer. So yeah, I've got the camp that I'm speaking at this summer that I'm really excited about, or I've got the trip that I'm taking with my family, or the weekend at the lake, coming up that I'm like, oh, I can't wait for this. But it's also like, I'm also looking forward to this conversation. As I've had my week in front of me, I'm like, okay, that's like one of those peak points, 2:00 on Wednesday when we're recording this. I'm like, that's the podcast with Whitney. And so I think that almost helps change the mundane mindset of work and those other things that kind of slap young adults in the face. Like, wait, this is what it's like, because our day is really like a third. It's a third at work, for most people. It's a third sleeping. And then it's a third choose your adventure.
Right.
And I think sometimes the way we live the third of work almost makes us feel by default that like, I'm just going to watch Netflix, or I'm just, and we miss out on so much. And so I think that's another thing, is just initiating a third of your life and being really, really like excited to cultivate, what is that third going to look like? And what's the third at work going to look like? The one that we don't have much control over is the sleep one.
Right.
Hopefully that's uneventful and not exciting at all.
Don't waste it on Netflix.
Yeah. Well, one of the things in the area of growth too is just mentorship. And I think, again, you guys, have been mentors to many. And maybe this is one of those things you're really good at giving and not great at getting. But I think mentorship is one of those things that's really important too. How would you go about finding a mentor and finding somebody that's a few stages ahead? What would you look for, and how would you go about that?
That's a really good question. So I think looking for someone who has the same values, the same things that you hold important to you is really important. And then looking in the area of look for people who are doing it well. And sometimes I honestly think we can maybe feel a little intimidated or like even like jealous, like, oh, they have everything all. But like rather than like feel the jealous, like completely go the other way and be like, you are doing awesome at this. Like I want to learn from you. How are you doing it? And so I think that's a really big piece. And then I think there are times where, I mean, for me, I feel like it's been hard. Like there aren't very many women pastors around me. So I have been in seasons where I felt like I'd love to have a mentor, but I don't really see one. And so I think not in all seasons of life. I mean, I think the ideal is to have a real person like sitting down across the table from you, but not to forget, like it can also come from afar.
Right.
I have spent a lot of time listening to women preaching and speaking and teaching and learning from them, even though I don't get to know them personally. They live somewhere in Texas, but they're people that I really admire and look up to and would like to emulate in my life. And so in those times when you're like, I'd love to have a mentor, but I can't find one, keep looking and keep searching. But in the meantime, it doesn't mean that you can't have anything I mean, that's the one good thing about social media is like, you can learn a lot from somebody, even though you live nowhere close to them.
That's so good. And you can't give away what you don't have either.
Yeah.
And so you are in a season too, where you have a lot of young ministers and pastors, and we've been able to see a number of women go into full-time ministry or into just part-time ministry or whatever the case is, and a lot of them come to you like, Whitney, what do I do? How do I do it? And I think you could sit there and be like, well, I don't know, but you've sought it out, and therefore you at least have something that you can give beyond just your own experience too. And I think with mentors and people that have a heart for mentorship or recognize like a calling of mentorship, not everybody has to have that, but they probably don't have a shortage of opportunities. So they're usually not just like, who can I mentor?
right.
Looking around. There's some that do, and we are grateful for those people, but most are almost happier than you are when you ask them. And when I was in New Jersey working with AO1, I was new into the nonprofit space, and we had a quite large budget, and none of us knew what we were doing. And I just kind of thought one day, I was like, who is in this world? And Paul Herkman from Venture, who I've met through Chi Alpha at different events, he kind of popped in my brain, and he had talked to me a while before that. And so he was fresh in my mind. So I called him and I just asked him, like, would you like monthly just take an hour and just listen to all my dumb questions? I was literally like, just tell it to me like I'm in 7th grade trying to run, because that's how I feel. Like I'm trying to run a nonprofit as a 7th grader. It's my mental ability right now. And he did that. Like he helped me kind of take the big picture and make it small. And I'm so grateful for him. And I've had that in different areas of my life, but I've learned that if I want it, I need to go get it. Like I need to ask them, make the call. And so I don't know who that person is for our listeners today, but like there's probably somebody, and it could be, it's not like I asked Paul, all right, I also want you to mentor me in basketball because I really want to be good at basketball. He's like, I don't play basketball. Like, no, you're my mentor. But in different areas of our life. And so whether that's somebody in finance, if you're a parent or you're newlywed, like we do a lot of premarital counseling as pastors, and I'm starting to do more postmarital counseling of like 6 months later, like now let's have that conversation again because it's different now. But yeah, definitely something to pursue. Yeah. And not wait on the sideline for.
No, so good.
Yeah. What as many of our young adults in our circle, as you lead Chi Alpha, they're graduating the next few weeks, or some of them are. In your experience as a new grad, like looking back, it feels like for me it's 10 years already, which is insane. But looking back, like what encouragement would you give them today?
Sometimes I feel like we want to have this perfect setup or perfect scenario before we start something after graduation. Like, well, I want to know that I'll be able to do it really well, or I want to be completely knowledgeable about it before I start it. But what I would encourage you in is just take one step. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to know exactly what you're doing, but just take one step and see what happens. And sometimes you'll take a couple steps and you'll be like, nope, that wasn't quite the right thing. But you might take a couple steps and like step into something that you never dreamt you would be doing, and find full purpose and so much joy in it. And so I think, we don't need to be able to see to the end before we make a move, but just take a step and trust that you have something to offer, and trust that God has you. And so often we're so thankful that we took that first step. That's so good.
I think with the podcast, that was kind of why we called it Going Somewhere Podcast, because I feel like I don't know where I'm going.
I still don't either.
And the story of Abraham, I've told it on the podcast before, but the story of Abraham was kind of the genesis for us of our own journey in moving to New Jersey. This was before we were offered a job. We just knew in our hearts, like, this feels like something's going to change. Yeah. And it was the words of like, go to the place that it will show you, that have just kind of resonated with me. And I think Abraham stepped out in confidence. God didn't tell him, this is where you're going to end up. This is where your first place is. He just had to get up and go. And I think that is scary, but I know that's why this podcast exists, to help people navigate that difficult journey. One of the questions I ask everybody on the podcast is, if you were to go back to your young adult self, so looking 22-year-old Whitney in the eyes, what advice would you give her?
I think that kind of along the lines of our previous questions, but one thing I did not realize is how many different seasons there would be. I kind of thought there was the high school season, then the college season, and then like adult season, and it just kind of stayed the same after that. But wow, I feel like I've been on like 25 seasons since I was 22 years old. And so again, don't feel like you have to have like this like plan that's going to work out great for the rest of your life, but just take a step forward, because in a year and a half, everything's going to change, and then you'll have to adjust, and then another thing's going to change and you're going to have to adjust. And actually I've loved that life keeps changing and seasons look different, especially, in the single and in the married, and kids at different stages, and job expectations changing, and work hours changing. I mean, all those things, have a huge impact on our life. Right. And so we don't have to pick one thing that's going to work perfectly till we're 65 or whatever it is, but just take a step forward and kind of got to go with the flow. And God has a great, great plan.
Yes, he does. Thanks so much, Whitney. I know even just the seasons thing, like just the other night, she wouldn't mind me saying this, but Taylor was putting Rowan to bed. He turns 1 on Saturday. Exciting. And she came upstairs and I was doing bedtime with the big kids, and she had the tears streaming down her face. And I was like, what's wrong? She's like, he's getting big, and this is our last baby. And it's just, we're at that point where he is about to walk. He is moving everywhere. The little baby stage for our family is coming to an end. Yeah. And it's probably not healthy, but Summit started like making faces and dancing and jumping. And then he asked, does that make you happy? Like, we're like, you're not responsible for our happiness. But
it does make me laugh.
Yeah, we love you. We are though. But yeah, we're like, this is not like probably healthy behavior, but personality is shining right now. That's his. Kinsley went to get Kleenex. So Kinsley came back with Kleenexes for Taylor and was like dabbing her eyes. And then Summit's just like, does this make you happy? Yes. Thank you so much. But no, I every once in a while on my phone, a picture or a video like on Google will be like 8 years ago today. And it's like one of Amaya. And it's actually really special because honestly, when you guys had Amaya and I got to be just a part of your life in a small way, I was like, I want to be a girl dad. Like before girl dad was like a thing. I was like watching Nate as a dad to a daughter. Aww. And then getting to like be at Chi Alpha events and just lug her around, or at fall retreat, just carry her around. Like, it was really special. So now having my own daughter and now my 2 boys, it's really fun.
Your family is so great.
Oh, well, thank you. And you guys are too. And thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. So much fun.
This is so fun. Nate, you're next. Nate's next. No,
Yes.
but thanks so much for listening, everybody. And if you don't already subscribe and like it, comment, do all those things so that more people can watch. But we'll see you, and you'll hear us next time on the Going Somewhere podcast.
See ya.
It's me again. You made it to the end of an episode. Why not start another one? There's more just like it on the Going Somewhere podcast YouTube channel. Click one of the videos that you see right now to get all the latest, and there's a button in the middle. Click it to subscribe. We'll see you next time. Stay up to date on everything Going Somewhere podcast. We love you.